I'm interviewing Mrs. Daisy Meilak. It's the 18th of September 1984. The interview is taking place at Ascot Vale in Victoria. I'd like to begin by asking, when did you first have contact with Maltese people in Australia?
When I knew your uncle, or beforehand, because it was through a Maltese that I met your uncle.
Who was that and what were the...
Oh, that was Mick Pace. In those days, he lived at Sunshine. I was about 16 and a half year old then.
Well, when was that?
1926.
And he lived out at Sunshine?
They're a very old known family out there, Sunshine. Lived in Moreland Road.
Did you know, what was his story? Did you know when he came out to Malta?
Oh no, he was very illiterate and could just talk, and that's all. We met him through business. He had two brothers, Sam and Charlie, and there was him.
And they were out here too?
Yes.
Sunshine?
Yes, in Moreland Road. And my mother was in business, and that's how we got to know him.
And what did he and his brothers do?
Well, when they first came, they used to work in the Albion quarries. Then Mick turned around and opened up a fruit shop in Mount Alexander Road, Mooney Ponds. And, you know, from then on. So that's how it was that I started there.
And you said you met them through your...
Through my mother.
Mother?
Well, she was in business in the Victoria market. And, you know, how you get to know people, and that's how it was. Just came there doing business, and that's how I got to know him.
And then through him you met...
He introduced me to Joe. Joe had only been out here about 18 months then. And Joe was living, had a room at his house in Latrobe Street. And that was it.
Well, what house was that?
Oh, don't ask me. It was a house down near Spencer Street, between King and Spencer Street in Latrobe Street.
Is that the one that was owned by Maltese?
Oh, he was Maltese. He was Maltese, Mick Pace. And,
I see, it was Mick Pace's
Mick's house, Pace's house, yes. And that's how I met Joe. I went out. In fact, Mick Pace was rather keen on my sister, and she was interested in another man, but I wasn't allowed out with Joe for 18 months on my own, because my mother thought I was too young. You know, that was the old idea. And Joe being a Maltese, well, it's like foreigners today, you didn't know who or what they were or anything else, you know, and we used to just go to the pictures and have tea and one thing and the other. And then, of course, when I was 18, I was allowed out with... Well, she could see Joe was respectable, and he was trustworthy for me to go out with, and that's just how it was.
Apart from Nick and his brothers, did you meet any other Maltese people through them?
No, I didn't. I wasn't sort of interested in anybody. I wasn't interested. I just used to go to the pictures and that with Joe and back and home, you know. And then when the wharf strike was on and my uncle come to town for business, he came to see me, and he got Joe to go up with him while the trouble was on and work for him in the brickworks in Yanco, New South Wales. And while we was up there, there was trouble with the government, and Lang, who was, I think he was Premier or something to do with it, he closed the banks. My uncle just said to me, what are you and Joe going to do? And I said, oh, why? And he said to me, you're going to marry him? I said, oh, one day. Well, he said to me, it's this way. if you're going to get married, he said, I can't keep him on while there's married men and families out of work. And he said, you better think about it. So we had a talk, and I wrote down home, and I said, I'm going to get married. My mother thought the worst, naturally, and and I turned around and we got married. We've been happy ever since. We've had our struggles in life.
What was the attitude to the idea of marrying a Maltese person in those days? Was there...
Oh, terrible. That's why my sister had to go out with me. She was older than me. And I wasn't allowed out with him because it was... Maltese. He was a foreigner, you know. And that's just what it was. 18 months. Yeah, 18 months. 18 months she came out with me because I wasn't allowed. When my mother saw that he was respectable and he was trustworthy with me, well, then she allowed me to go out, you know, with him. A couple of nights a week and weekends, and that was it.
So it was an anti-foreign attitude, not just anti-Maltese.
Oh,
anti-foreign. About Italians, that they've known what Maltese is, and the Italians, they were more Italians.
Yeah.
Because when I said to her, Maltese, she said, what part of Italy is that?
It was just foreign, yeah, just ignorance. We never... In those days, Barry, if you turned around and you was a Catholic, and from a Catholic family, if you went out with a Protestant, well, it wasn't welcomed at all in the family, you know. So it's very similar to that with the foreigners, see. But apart from that, you know, it was all right. But I've never regretted ever marrying. 54 years married, going on 55, not bad. That's right, yes.
When you met, so in 1928, was it?
Yes. Oh no, it'd be 26. We married in 1930.
So you met in 26?
Yeah, that's better. I went out with him for 3.5 years before we were married. And that was, 3.5 years off. That'd be about 26, 27, wouldn't it? Going on for 27.
So during those years, did you, through Joe, did you meet other Maltese in Melbourne?
No. I only knew Mick Pace and Joe. I knew
and his brother Charlie.
Charlie and Sam. That's all.
Three brothers, you know, right? But Mick was the oldest, like.
And really, when I was going out to Joe, when he introduced me to Joe, my mother was very strict who he was and whether he was respectable, you know, because in those days there was a terrible lot of Maltese living with girls, you know, and she was very particular who I was to associate with, which you couldn't condemn her.
No. But it's interesting that there were enough Maltese in Melbourne to have for people to be aware.
Oh, there wasn't that many really. I don't know.
There was, I think, it used to be more in Sydney, but they were working in the mines
and up the sugar fields and all up that way. But I never ever sort of associated with them or that, you know. I didn't know them or that. As I say, we knew Mick Pace and Charlie and Sam. And Mick was the oldest of the three brothers, and my mother had faith in Mick and that, and he knew how I was brought up, and he wouldn't dare it.
And I happened to be with him.
Yes, and he wouldn't dare introduce anybody. It was a bit suspicious to me through my mother, because he knew that she wouldn't tolerate it. So that's what it was.
You mentioned before about before we started taping it, you told me a bit about the Depression.
Yes, after I met Joe, when we got married in 1930, as I told you, the banks was closed. Well, I said to Joe, I said, I'll marry you on conditions that Christmas time I go down. No, Easter time I go home. He said to me, you can go home. So the first week we were married, we turned around and he came home and he says, here you are, you can go home now. And I said, well, so quick, you know, young and excited. He says, there's my cheque, I'm finished. He says, the banks are closed on Uncle Fred. So I said, oh. So anyhow, we finished up and we came down here. Well, that was the beginning of the Depression. I think the Depression started in 1929. And of course, we had our struggles. I was home for a couple of weeks. Well, I didn't want to live home, and they didn't want me home, as the saying is. So we got a house in North Melbourne, and from there we shifted down to Stanley Street. And when we got the house in Stanley Street, the agent, Welsh and Company, turned around and asked who was going to pay the rent if Joe wasn't working. And he got in touch with my mother and she said, I'll stand for their rent, they're all right. And then we shifted down Stanley Street, and when we shifted down there, well, it was all right because we had about 6 or 7 Maltese young married Maltese in Stanley Street.
In Stanley Street itself?
Yes, about 6 or 7. There was the Elul's, and then there was us, then there was Vallis, then there was Ferrugias, Aegises and Senies. Yeah. They were all young people.
I know it was a long time ago, but I'd appreciate as much detail as you could give me about them. I know it was a long time.
Yeah, well,
do you remember anything about like when they came over here, what jobs they did if they were working?
Well, half of them weren't working. We're all on the sustenance with the Depression. And those that did work done a day or something at the Albion quarries. But mostly, as I say, all along there, they were all young marrieds, and everybody was on the sustenance. It was a matter of 8 and 6 a week in those days. I had our rent was 11 shillings a week. That's what it was. And Joe used to do the house up, like paint it and keep it nice. And I used to go down the street with me 11 shillings in my hand when Mr. Welsh used to come along. He used to go along, you know, knocking on the doors for the rent. And I used to go down the street with me 11 shillings. And he used to say to the others, this is a very good woman, this. She always comes and meets me with the rent. But I was frightened of my door being open, and he could see we had it all nicely done up, because he'd tell you, out, I want this house to rent. See? And that's what it was.
But what happened after, that owner was a woman.
Oh, yes.
And she came with him once.
Yes, and looked through the house.
Through the house, and she said to the agent, she said, look, give him whatever he wants, papers and paint, whatever he wants.
To care for it, you know, we used to care for the house. But,
So say with the Law family, were they married, was he married to a Maltese? Yeah, were they not?
All married to Australian girls, young Australian girls, yes. And, when you go out to Eunice, you'll meet one of Charlie Senior's girls. I think Kitty's about 12 months older than Eunice. So, you know, we're all along.
They used to fight, and they used to want to fight. And now like that together.
Yeah. And in those days, the ice cream man used to come along in the afternoons of the bell, and whoever was there.
The milkman used to come and leave the belly up, fill it up for you.
Yeah, and the ice cream man had come, and whoever had money, like it might be Charlie, it might be Joe, it might be Frank Ferrugia, we'd all turn around and see whoever had money. Well, the kids would get a penny ice cream each. It was a great deal. Yes, I know that, but but you know what kids are for 3 or 4 year old.
But those families you mentioned were mainly out of work, were
Oh, all out of work.
All out of work.
What do we
Frank Ferrugia and Charlie Seeney used to go out fishing. Well, if they turned around and got more than fish than what they wanted, well, we'd get a bit of a handout. We might get 2 or 3 fish. He's told you about the bananas.
I don't know if that's on tape. Could you tell us again about the bananas?
Well, the bananas, well, Joe goes down the market with Frank Ferrugia one day, and when he goes down there, he's got the fella cleaning up the wholesale fruit market, and he's taken bananas down to the tip, you know, not the tip, but to a sort of a hollow business. And he says to Joe, do you want some bananas? Joe says, yes. First he thought he was joking, but then he turned around and it was true. And he said, yes. He says, 2 boxes. He got a box for himself and Frank... No, Frank Ferrugia got a case, and we come home. But see, we were all that poor, and nobody could afford much. They'd all be dished out. You'd get some, or I'd get some. Somebody else, you know, went right down. We were a good lot.
We used to get for food. We wasn't short for food at all, because you go in the market, a cabbage salad at a penny. Everything cheap, you know. I mean, you can get a leg of lamb there for 2 bob.
Well, we'd get a plate of fish down the market, an ordinary dinner plate full of fish, and one on top. That's for 2 bob. You turn around and get that. And when Eunice was coming home, we were all on a sustenance in those days. Well, there was Joe and I and Eunice. I'd get 8 and 6 a week from the town hall, like from the relief business in those days. Well, one grocer, Montgomery's in Spencer Street, said to me one day, Mrs. Meilak, do you come from the country? And I said, no. I said, I come from Ascot Vale. She said, oh, I thought you come from the country, the way that you turn around and manage the money. I'd have 8 and 6 for groceries, 2 bob for bread, 5 shillings for meat, and that was it, you know. And I had a room let up in my place there, and I had an old man there. He was on a pension. Well, he used to give me 7 shillings a week for that room. Well, see, I only had 4 shillings to make up for my rent.
We all had a girl like Eunice.
With Eunice, when Eunice come along, well, I used to get a tin of lactogen for her like milk, because I couldn't breastfeed her, and because I had no nourishment myself, not alone to provide for the baby, and we used to turn around and get like that.
But I used to get involved from...
With Joe. Joe used to go down, how Eunice's clothes got. I tell you, we were bloody poor, Barry. Joe used to go down and get a sack of coal down on a... I'm just saying, he used to get a sack full of coal. He used to sell it for a shilling. 2 bob, was it? 2 bob to turn around, and that's the only way that I got Eunice's baby clothes.
I used to get a header truck, 2-wheeler truck. I went to a blacksmith, made me a couple of wheels all right, a truck, you know, like with the spring. And I used to go down there, and used to be a lot of where they dumped the trucks, the coal before, the tip, and then they put the line on it. Well, outside the line, you can dig where you like, and you can pick up 20 bags from here. And when you can't get it there, I used to go near the boats, and they tip it for you. See, I know a bloke there, you know, the collie, and they'll tip it out, and we'll pick it up.
And we used to sell for 2 bob a bag.
Once she was with me, and she had the Eunice.
Eunice in a frame.
And a couple of policemen behind us. I was going home with the truck. And I can hear the police say, look at that coal, it's nice, clean, you have to pinch it. He said, don't be bloody silly. The other one wanted to see, and the other one they didn't want to see. Anyhow, and then he come and opened the bag. He says, look, I told you it's all clean.
It's a baby.
He says, where you got it from? I said, from the water there. I said, you can go have a look. He says, I told you, the other cop. I said, he said, I told you that this is not pitched or anything. I says, you go there. I said, and yeah, what they tip the coal to the trucks. I said, there's a lot in the water. I said, there we'll get it, pull it up, and let it dry. Tell him lies. and dry and then pick it up. I said, there's only the sea there. Anyhow, he says, all right, go. See?
So anyhow, when she turned around, oh, that was all right to see her. She's going, well, when you were on a sustenance in those days, it isn't like the unemployment today. If you turned around, you'd have to do some, say for instance you got $1 a week, well, a 10 bob a week relief pay. Well, you'd have to go to either the zoo or down by the shrine or something and cut your hours out. Your whatever money you got, cut so many hours out and that'd pay for it. Anyhow, we turned around and we done that. Well, Eunice, I think, was about 11 months old. She wasn't walking. No, 10 months old. She wasn't walking. Joe got a letter that he had to go for 3 months up to Albury on the railway line just for work. He'd get a certain amount of wages it was in those days, and he'd have to allot a certain amount to me. Well, he was away for 3 months, and I saved £17. Well, I thought I was the wealthiest woman going. I never saw so much money in all my life. So we turned around and we done that. Then another time we went to Dramana. Well, then after that, the wharf started to pick up. They started to get the CR licences and he was working. Well, that was it. We turned around and we saved. We had £250, wasn't it, when we bought that house? We thought we were rising in position. We thought we were rising in position.
I had 350.
No, wait a
and
minute.
I gave him 250.
No, wait a minute. We thought when he come back on this and he started to work on a wharf again, that we wanted to get something a bit more nicer than Stanley Street. So I went up to Welsh, the agent, and I said to Welsh, I'd like to buy a house. He said, what? I said, I'd like to buy a house. And I said to him, he said to me, yeah. He said, how much money have you got? I said, £250. He said, I've got the very house. He said, you want? He says, and I'm showing you nothing else. Yeah. He took us to Hawke Street and we got the house. He said, I want £450 for this house. I says, but I've only got 250. He said, that's all right, I'm taking you to a bank. He took us to a bank in Elizabeth Street and we got the other £200. I said to him, now look, before I start, I had my house in Stanley Street. I said, now before I start, I said, these people have got to get out, haven't they? He said, yes. Well, I said, I'll buy the house on conditions these people shift in my house in Stanley Street. He said to me, I don't know. Well, I said, I don't want the house. I said, they've got 4 or 5 children here, and I said, they've got to have a house. So anyhow, I got it that way, that Schofield shifted out of Hawke Street into Stanley Street, and I got my house. We went to the bank, and we paid the house off. So anyhow, we got that. So by this time...
Which number was it? Do you remember?
195 Stanley Street.
And Hawke Street?
110 Hawke Street, yeah. So I turned around and we got that. And then, of course, Eunice went to school, and that was it. I finished up selling Hawke Street. Hawke Street bought this house. But I always liked properties, and I bought a couple of houses lower down. I said to Joe, I said, I've got a bit of money there. I says, what about us buying the house. I always said no. I went up.
Was going to get married there.
No, that was before this. And I said to him, I'd been through the houses, and I knew they were only 4-roomed houses, but they were brick and they were solid. And I went up to Mr. Riek of Welsh & Co, and I said to him, those houses down in Hawke Street, I said, they're up for sale. He said to me, yeah. I said, what do you reckon I'll go? He says, are you interested in them? And I said, oh, yeah, I don't know. I said, I am. So he said to me, right. He said to me, how much money have you got? And I said, I think I had £300 in those days.
When was this?
Eh?
What year was?
What was this? Eunice was going to school. Eunice would be about 7.
Yes, I remember.
So about 1950. So anyhow, we turned around and we got there, and the auction's coming on, and I happened to look around, and when I did, before this, Joe and I had a talk about them. I went down to Mrs. Whitall, and I said to Mrs. Whitall, that was one of the tenants in the house, was she interested in buying? She said, no, I'm not interested in buying. Next door was a policeman, Ron Fletcher.
And he not talking about.
And he turned around, he was here a while ago, and he come in, and I said to Mrs. Fletcher, can I go through this house? She says, what for? I says, I think I'll buy it. She said, no, you can't come through here. I don't want to let anyone through here. I says, too bad. I says, I've been through here before you've lived in it. I says, I know what the house is. So she says, oh. So anyhow, the day of the auction, I go down to the auction, and when I look around, I see this here Jimmy Woods. His mother lived a couple of doors down from us. And Jimmy Woods used to work for Simpson, the agent. And I said to Mr. Riek, I'm leaning up against the fence like this, and I said to Riek, I said, what's Jimmy Woods doing here? Oh, he says, he's just here, he says, to boost up the price. He said, if it goes at whatever Simpson's told him to pay, he'll buy it, he said. So I said, oh yes. So I thought, well, Jimmy Woods, you're not here for nothing. I love buying properties, Barry. And I thought to myself, you're not here for anything. So I'm bloody well watching him. And he goes up and up these 2 houses, and goes up, and in these days rents were fixed. I couldn't have whatever I wanted to charge. The government fixed them. So I said, I'm watching him. So all of a sudden Riek says to me, go up a bit more. He says, go up another £20. He says, Woods is finished, you can't go no higher. So I go up and I buy the houses. So Joe's working. When he comes, he's coming up, because he knew, like, I said to him, what will I do? I says, I've got no money, and Joe's working. He says, have you got a bank book? I said, yeah, I've got a bank book. So I gave him the bank book, and Joe's coming home at 5 o'clock at night, and as he's coming up Hawke Street, a woman goes down to him, puts her hands on his hands, says, oh, Mr. Meilak, she said, I'm so pleased, she said, you got the houses. And Joe didn't know what he was talking about. He didn't know what she was talking about. And she said, you're my new owner. Joe says, am I? He said, yes. So he turned around, and we had Mrs. Whitall. So we had these 2 houses, and I said to Mrs. Fletcher, see, I said, I didn't have to go through the house. I said, I knew what I was buying. So she said to me, oh, well, that's all right. So Riek had told me before this, he says, they've got those houses, he says, but as soon as ever they're sold, the Fair Rents Board will put them up again. He says, it'll be up a bit more. So I've got Eunice here going, and in one of these houses was a Maltese, which, we got to know him. Frank de Bone wasn't no relation to you, was he? No. Anyhow, he was there, and no, he wasn't there. We bought the houses, and Mrs. Whitall was there, and I said to Joe, we're going to sell one of those. I wanted something for Eunice for school. And he said to me, don't ask me for nothing. He said, I've got no money. He says, go down there and ask them to give you some money. I said, oh yeah. I says, oh well, I'll turn around and I'll see about if Mrs. Whittle wants to buy her house. So Frank de Bone come the night that we bought the house. Frank de Bone come home and he says to Joe, I'll buy one of those houses off you. He says, I'll give you £1,000 for it.
This is Frank de Bono?
No, T-Bone, T-A-B-O. This is another lot altogether. He says, well, I'll give you £1,000. I think I paid £1,750 for the two houses. He said to me, I'll give you £1,000, he says, for one of those houses. I said, no, I don't want to sell them. So anyhow, he's living up with another Maltese, Messias, up in Dryburgh Street in a bungalow.
Where were they?
Messias in Dryburgh Street, North Melbourne. He's living in a bungalow and he's got 3 children. She's Maltese, she can't speak English, and he's there. So I said, I can't do so. I said to him, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll ask Mrs. Whittle if she wants to buy the house. I said, because I'd only bought them for investment. And I said, if she wants to buy the house, I said, and if not, I said, you can have the house. So I went down to Mrs. Whittle and I said to Mrs. Whittle, I'm going to sell one of these houses. I said, do you want to buy it? She says, I've got no hope of getting any finance. She says, we're too old. She said, and Gerard Wire Tying wouldn't turn around and give him any money. And I said, oh yeah. So I said, well, it's this way. I said, Frank de Bone wants to buy the house. I said, he wants to give me £1,000 for it. But I said, you'll have to get out. But I told him that I'd come and ask you first. She says, oh, well, I can't do it. So anyhow, Frank de Bone finishes up and buys the house and shifts in. That's all right. Then I'm standing on the veranda one day and the health inspector comes along and he says to me, you Mrs. Meilak? And I said, yes. He says, do you own Fletcher's house down there? I said, yes. He said to me, why don't you do some repairs to it? I said, look, I told Mrs. Fletcher when I bought those houses that I had no money, but if she wanted anything else done to come up to me and tell me and I'll get Joe to do it, or, be fair with her. He says, oh. I said, look, never mind about him being in the police force and trying to show authority. I said, I'm not worried at all about him. So anyhow, I went down and I just said to him, it's a very nice thing you've done. He says to me, well, look, Mrs. Meilak, he said, it's this way. He said, they've come into the office, he said, and want repairs and got us, he said. So he said, that's the sort of people you're dealing with. So anyhow, that was all right. I sold with alls. That house stood me in about £750. Well, then Eunice decides to get married. Well, I didn't want her living in rooms or anything else, so I go down to Fletcher's and I said...
So, excuse me, but what time period are we in now? Is this after the war or...?
Oh yes, this is after the war. This is, how long has Eunice been married? 28 years ago. Oh no. 30 years ago, I don't know.
So this is in the 50s?
Yes, this is in the 50s. Yeah, in the 50s. So I went to Mrs. Fletcher and I said, Mrs. Fletcher, I says, I would like to have the house vacant. And she says, what for? And I said, well, there's an option. I said, Eunice and Joe are going to get married. And I said, I want them to either live in this house or else I want to sell it. She says, how much do you want for the house? I says, £1,400. She says, I wouldn't give you that. She said, when I shift, I want to go into a new home. I wouldn't give you that for that. And I says, oh, well, it's just up to you. She says, all right. So I said, oh, well, I want the house for them to go into because I didn't want to live at home with me and I didn't want to go into a room. So that was all right. A few months after, Mrs. Fletcher, a few weeks after, Mrs. Fletcher knocks on her door and she said to me, Mrs. Meilak, do you still want to sell that house? And I said, yes, but not at the price I offered it to you for. I said, I want more for it. Oh, she said, ridiculous. So she goes off. She finishes up giving me £3,000 for the house. So that was all right. Anyhow, later on in life, when Lawrence and Helen and were all playing cricket, she buys up a Kilside. She invites me up. When she invites me up, I said, this is a nice house, and praised it, you know. She said to me, she said, you know who I've got to thank for this, don't you? And I said, no, who? She said, you. She said, because if you wouldn't have sold me that house, she said, I wouldn't have had this house. You know, a few months ago, there's a knock on the front door. Knock on the front door, Mrs. Fletcher. They've come in as good as anything, you know, all that was done. But, oh, crikey, we've had an uphill struggle.
So
Then...
with the Hawke Street, when you first moved into Hawke Street, there was Frank Tabone already living...
No, they shifted out. They were living up in there, few years. We were living there a few years and then they rented this house, you know.
So, were there any Maltese families in Hawke Street?
Oh, there was different families, but I didn't associate with them. There was Joe Zara. They lived up next door to Briscoe's.
Are they the ones who had a boarding house?
Yes, that's them. And there were Salivas. They lived up in Railway Place. That's right, well, you could say more or less in the street.
What did the Salivas do? Do you remember?
Oh, he was on the wharf too. Scab on the wharf he was. And he died. She's dead. They're both dead. Yeah, Tootsie's dead. And there's two fellas living there now. I forget their names, you know, Joe and Frank. Yeah. They're still there, I see by the telephone book. Villa, that's right. They're still living there. And very quiet. Yeah, I saw their name in the telephone book the other day.
What did they do?
Oh, I don't know.
One was on the wharf, one on the railway.
I couldn't tell you.
I think one was on the railway. Yeah. We never say hello to them.
You know, we just bid them the time of day. We never associated with anybody. You know, we were always nice and that with them, but we never got friendly.
So, say in that period, Daisy, late 20s through to late 30s, what contact would you have with Maltese people in Melbourne?
Well, I never knew anybody, only this here Mick Pace had introduced me to Joe. So I never associated with anybody else with Maltese or that. But it was more like when we...
But what about, say, the neighbours in Stanley Street?
Oh, this is when we were married. Yeah, oh yes. Well, I'll still see us... there's still... Well, I don't know whether Vincy Elliott's still alive. Frank's dead. Yeah. Mrs. Seeney, Mr. and Mrs. Seeney, I often see them there. They're living in North Melbourne still.
Yeah, they shifted from there living in
North Melbourne. And Eula's dead, Mick's dead, Frank Rooser, they've all died. So they're all...
just shifted from there.
Aegis are living down here in there. And Gorseys, you know, we knew them, but we weren't people for running in and out houses or getting too close. You know what I mean? Tony Gorsey, now, if you speak to Tony Gorsey and Eunice was here, she'd say, hello, Uncle Tone, how are you? See? Camilleri's, his sister had the fish shop down in Spencer Street. And we was always sort of friendly with them, but never got that close with them. You know.
Angelo Camilleri?
No, I don't know Angelo Camilleri. I don't know where he came from. Although the name's familiar, but that may as well be Buttigieg or Borge or something like that, you know.
One thing I'm trying to work out is I'm trying to paint a portrait in my mind where the Maltese were in Melbourne in the late 20s to the late 30s.
Oh, all over the place. And there wasn't that many of them
People
here.
always mention like King Street,
Yeah,
Spencer Street,
that's right.
West Melbourne.
That's right.
And I wonder, you mentioned the fish and
Ship shop, Camilleri's. That's Tony Gorsey's sister. Yeah. See, Stella is Tony Gorsey's wife. His eldest son, Georgie, went to school with my Eunice. Even last time there was a gathering at St Mary's, and Georgie Gorsey come up and to Helen, and he says, "Hello, how are you?" So she says, "I'm not Eunice, you know." He says, "I know you're not Eunice." But Georgie Gorsey and Carmel Camilleri and all, they were all brought up together, but we weren't people for going. Parnassus, yes. Dinny Parnassus' cousin, we were very friendly with. In fact, Julian Parnas, he's dead, Julian Parnas and Dolly Parnas are godparents to Helen and Lawrence.
Really?
Yes. So, and they're cousins to Dinny Parnas.
So say in the late 20s through to the late 30s, if you were walking along Spencer Street, King Street...
Yeah, you'd see them all. You'd see
What
them.
would you see? You'd see the Camilleri fish and chip shop.
Yeah, well,
You'd see...
It's a Spencer Street.
well, that was like Joe Parnas, Dinny's cousin.
Yeah.
Everybody knew the Parnases in Stanley Street. Dolores Camilleri, she used to go to Parnas. That was the sort of meeting place for the likes of me. I'd be up there every Saturday night with my kids up at Parnas's. Joe Parnas would be down the club there with the fellas. He had a carrion business. Well, he turned around and he'd have to sort of be there if there was any business going, you know. Then next door to Camilleri's in Spencer Street, there was a cafe. A fella by the name of Pisani. He ran that.
He died too, was it?
Yeah, Joe Pisani, that's right. Well, he died.
So what end of Spencer Street is this?
Right opposite Sands and McDoodle's, just up from Latrobe Street, which is Latrobe and Jeffcott Street. See? And then that's where those lot was.
Well, you said the coffee shop?
No, he only had the fish and chip.
No, Fish and Chip Camilleri's, he had the cafe. Joe Pisani had the cafe. Restaurant, yeah.
And then...
The fish next to it.
Next door.
Right. Sorry.
No, that's right. And then there was Tony Gorsey, he had the Woodyard and Carrion. So, well, he just lived next door but one, you can say, in Roden Street. Hey? Well, now there he's sold that yard and he's got that other place in King Street now. And that was just that, but we weren't, apart from going to Parnas's, every Saturday night we got to Parnas's and Dolores. Dolores, yeah. But
Can I ask you about some places in King Street and Spencer Street that I've heard of?
yeah.
I believe there were a couple of boarding houses. There was Zara.
Zara lived in Hawke Street, between Spencer Street and Adley Street.
Did he own a... Did he take people in?
Yes.
Before that, he used to have, where I used to live in Lonzo Street, Zara.
Oh, but I don't know about that.
Yeah, but I know.
Yeah.
Joe Zara, Joe Parnas used to go there with the dog.
Yes.
Joe Zara,
They lived in...
Lonzo Street where I used to live.
But since then, I'll tell you where they lived in Lonsdale Street. He used to take people in and that. You know where the electrical place there is on the corner of Spencer and Lonsdale Street on that side? What is it? Some Melbourne City Council or something.
Yeah, FEC, isn't it?
Yes. Well, something, he lived about 4 or 5 doors up there.
That's where I was.
That's right. Well, they shifted from there and then they come to Hawke Street.
Yes.
Yes.
But I know him down there when I
Well,
was...
Mrs. Zara's dead, Joe's dead.
Then, see, that Joe who had, you know where Tony's shop was?
Yes.
Tony the barber, not the barber. Next
Next door, yeah.
Yes, his brother.
Yeah.
that Joe had that house.
Yes.
See, when Zara shifted from there, Joe had it.
Oh, yes, well,
Because
I
used
don't
to
know
live there for a while myself.
Yes, no, well, I don't know nothing about that.
Who
But
was it? Do you remember the surname at all? Was it Ferrugia, was it?
No, I can't. Who had it? Who had that house? I was wondering about Joe. He used to live in it. It was a nice chap too.
yeah, well, that was Joe Zara. He lived in Hawke Street.
I lived there for about, say, a few weeks. Me and a couple of more Maltese there.
Yeah.
That one in the room.
And who else did you want to know about in Spencer Street?
I was going to ask about the barber, actually. Was it Portelli? Tony Portelli?
No.
Joe... What's his name? Buttigieg, isn't it?
Yes, I used to call him Joe Butt.
But we used to call him
Buttigieg. You know, Dad told you about him, where they used to meet when he come from the boat and he got the letters and that. Yeah, well, that's the same.
And next door, his brother.
Yes.
See?
Joe had the barber shop,
and Joe
had the sort of... I know he did, but that was a suite, something like a nook bar. Yes, nook bar.
Yeah. And other Buttigieg.
Buttigieg, that was their name, but Joe's referred to them as Joe Butt. When he turned around and come from off the boat and he went to King Street to pick up somebody to find out where the taxi driver took him. You'll find out. Well, that's the shop where it was. Yeah. Now, who else was nobody else had an apartment house.
There was also the...
Well, Zara had the Zara.
The club, it was a delicent hotel, or Joe Butt had turned around and everybody used to meet there. There was no sort of, no club. It was just a sort of a empty shop, you could say, and they'd all sort of congregate there, you know, but there was no club.
Do you remember where it was?
Yeah, kind of Latrobe and King Street, on that side.
No,
on the north.
On the south, more the south side, on the south, over on the corner like that. And Joe Butt's shop was here, the barber. The barber was on this corner and the Delarson pub was on that, what they used to call the club. That's right, yes. And did Tony Gorsey give you any information?
I can't see him till December. Well, I can't make December. Only because he's so busy and the times that were suitable for me weren't suitable.
That's right, yes. Well, they're living up in Victoria Street now, North Melbourne.
Yes, yeah. That
Tony never used to the club there.
Oh no, Tony
He
didn't.
used to go to Dennis Club.
Danny wasn't a Maltese, was he?
Who?
Danny, was he a Maltese?
Danny was a Maltese.
Yeah. Well, he had a club. He had a
a
club opposite St Francis, in Lonsdale Street, where my house is now.
What was his surname? Danny...
Ferrugia. Ferrugia.
Oh, that makes sense, because I've heard of...
Yeah, Danny Ferrugia.
I remember that Danny was there when I know him was a young fella. He never had even pet cheap trousers on him. And the wharf, he used to tell him to go down on the wharf, but he wouldn't go, skipping. See, the union, like me, used to tell him to go in there and get a job. Yeah. He wouldn't.
But he done all right, don't you worry about him. And that fella, although he's dead now, he's turned around and he had the club there, and a gambling club, like not a social or anything like that. They'd be there for the cards and the horses. They had a bookmaker and everything else. Yes, and they used to turn around and they had men on the doors where he could go in. I remember one time I went there looking for somebody with Joe, and they turned around and said to me, who do you want? I says, Manuel Bajaya. And he said, wait till I go and see if he's there. And I never went in, but they went up and they got Manuel down Mantle as AWL from the war, to tell you the truth, and the police were after him. And I wanted to warn Manny. Manny finished up in Sydney and then he went to America.
Yeah. And died in America.
Died in America of cancer.
See, I went there once. The doctor took me, I couldn't get a haircut in the wartime. And they said there was a good barber. I went there, that's the first time I went there. I went there and it was shut.
What I meant is, he was a type of man, he had the bookmaking, I believe, he had the cards, and he had the hairdressing, everything, you know, as long as you were there bringing the money in, he was set. So, in fact, I'm talking about this, but I'm trying to tell you, a cousin of Joe's turned around, and as he's telling you, Tony Shicluna, he's dead now, he used to turn around and be the bookmaking there. The penciler. Yeah. See, they're all a lot of mysteries, if you can understand. But we didn't associate with them, you know. But that was the business side.
They had all over, all night, with bugger, what they call it. Sometimes the police will catch them, sometimes not. They go.
But they were a group on their own, you know.
And when the Maltese started to get organised in some way, I know it wasn't in a big way because it wasn't a big community, but someone was telling me they were represented at the centenary celebrations in Melbourne.
Well, they'll be. Look, I tell you, this fella, this Borge, is working hard, and he's going to just come real flop because nobody will work together with him. They start off all right, and there's no communication, there's no combining or anything. I've saw it with Paul Paris, I've saw it with Dinny and the damn lot of them trying to do their dances. Different ones have all started to get this sort of thing, but no, the novelty wears off, or somebody will do something and that'll be it. It all falls through.
Do you remember that though, in 34 it would have been, or 35?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, no, I couldn't tell you.
Centenary.
No,
It had a big banner apparently.
Oh, yeah. You go to the 8-hour show here, you've got the Maltese band, you've got the girls and the boys all in their red and white and everything else, and that's it, it all falls through. We had them up here, we used to go up, many a time I've taken up extra clothes in case somebody's fell in the dam up there or that, and Father Chanter, he was a very highly respected priest, and he was a lovely person. They turn around and they'd be all right, but see, that all fell apart. Everything falls apart.
I'd like to ask you about the priests.
Yeah.
I believe there was a Father Camilleri.
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
You know how to tell you about the Maltese? The priest, Eunice.
Eunice will tell you all. You write down different things that you want to know, and Eunice is the one, because she was in with all the priests. She was down with the immigration. She was in meeting the boats. So you write down different things that you want to ask her. But Father Chanter, he was a good one. But he was a trickster too. Father Chanter as a priest was lovely. But I'm still Maltese. Now you've got nowhere to go. Joe Meilak's got 2 rooms there. He'd come and say, Joe, you've got 2 rooms, you've got to have somebody here. Maltese family, they've got nowhere to go. He was a great worker like that. But what did he get? He started this here business of Salesians up here in Sunbury. That fell through. Nobody had sort of worked in with him. But this is the Maltese all over, Barry. They start these things, but they don't continue.
He got the Boys Town going too, didn't he? Up at
Yes. Up at Engadine, yes. See, things like that, Eunice can tell you all. Eunice was connected with the Boys Town and through the office. See, she can give you a terrible lot of information.
But what are your own recollections of Father Chanter? Did you meet him?
Oh, he was lovely. He was lovely. He was really lovely. He worked hard. He was all there to try and push the Maltese on. He turned around and he'd come and see and visit you and one thing and the other. We've got a Father Meilak here, you know. Have you heard about him?
In Victoria?
Yeah, out here at Ron Turner.
There was one in Adelaide.
Yeah, well, there's a younger one. In fact, to tell you the truth, Barry, where Danny works, he works in a chemist shop. And apparently these people are friends with Father Meilak. And he come to Danny, and this woman said, "Oh, I want you to meet somebody. It might be some relation to you." And she introduced Danny, and of course Danny was young, and Danny said to her mother, "Oh, Mummy," she said, "he's lovely. He's only a little priest." And I said to him, to Pam, I said, "I know Father Meilak." I says, "Father Peter Paul." And she said to me, "I don't know." She says, "There's an older one and a younger one." She said, "This is the young one that Danny's with, that Danny knows, and he's out at Wanturna." So out at Wanturna they've got the Jesuit fathers out there. Yes, well, see, he's out there with them. So what I meant is that's that. But our Father Chanter was a lovely man. He was.
Then we had our
Father Kalaya.
Kalaya.
Now, what year did Father Kalaya come here? Was that after the war or?
Before the war?
Oh,
No, after the war. After.
He used to come to our place now and then.
In the
Fridays.
50s, was it, or?
On Fridays to go for tea with us.
Yeah.
Fish.
He was a lovely priest. Yes. Yeah, he turned around and.
He says they can't cook.
What was it he used to say?
Father Kalaya was in. Father Kalaya was in. Got to shut it. I think. You want to shut it or?
No, it was just.
Father Kalaya, he come from Gzira. He was a parish priest there. And my father, friend with my father. And when my father received the photo of Eunice and Lawrence, Eunice big and Lawrence baby. And he says, "Is that your son wife?" See? He says, Eunice. He said, "That's the daughter." Right? He told us when he came in here. He used to be in church up here in St. Michael's and that.
Yes,
St. Michael's in North Melbourne. And he said there was 4 priests, and they put me there. They're going to now because they split them between 5 instead of 4.
And him being a foreigner, they didn't like the idea because they were Australian priests.
Even a priest.
Do you know if he was here in the prior to the 50s? Like was Father Kalaya here in the 1940s? Or?
Oh, he would be, I think. Wait a minute, what's young Lou McAuliffe? Young Lou McAuliffe's Eunice, Helen's 40, young Lou McAuliffe. You know, young Lou McAuliffe's about 36 years old. He was here in those days because don't you remember he used to go down and visit Dorothy? And Dorothy used to do his washing for him. Yeah. This is another Maltese that we know, and she's Australian. And we're godparents to one of her children. And she turned around and she said, "Oh, poor Father Kalaya." She said, he turned around and she said, he's got a terrible time. She said, he's got no money and no clothes. Yeah. Ah, yeah.
Was Father Spiteri too?
I don't know.
Helen Eunice will tell you everyone and she knows the name and everything. I only know Chandra.
Eunice can rattle off Barry like a record.
Yeah, well, I've got to see Eunice.
Yeah, you've got to see her.
When she went to confession, she goes to the house.
She doesn't go to confession to the ordinary parish priest. She goes to Royal Parade there. Oh yes. Joe and her, they're very religious. They're very religious. Not over religious, but if Joe's starting work at 6 o'clock, Eunice will go up to 7 o'clock mass up at St John's up there, and they don't go anywhere else but to the house for confession. And of course Joe's brother's a priest too, but he's gone home to Malta again now. He's at Rabat.
I remember meeting him when I was a kid.
That's right, yeah. That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
what about after the war, when the gates were opened in a way, but there was the assisted passage agreement and so on? Can you tell me about that period at all from your own experience? Like, did you help people who came from Malta? Say,
Well, we never helped.
them?
No, Eunice was working in the office, and she used to perhaps say men work and couldn't get into the office in time. They'd come to Eunice to, give her information or ask information or that. But Eunice is the one that you've got to get on for that type of thing. We've only brought our own family.
Yeah.
That's all.
We brought Angelo, Mary, and Mary when they come first, isn't it?
Yeah.
Angelo,
Lou.
that's half there. Oh, brought that.
When did Angelo
I
come?
brought your father, that's right. That's what we did. See, you're not allowed to do too many.
No.
Because if they can't, but you have to keep them there, it's how things like that. Until we got with 4, I think, yeah.
What about writing over, keeping in touch with people in Malta, family and friends, and letting them know that there were good opportunities?
Well, Joe only ever wrote to Auntie Jessie because she couldn't speak English or write or English. He's the only one. I always wrote to you, well, as your father knows, I always wrote to your father on behalf of the lot of us. Yeah. Even the other day I got a letter from Auntie Carmina. Well, I know Auntie Carmina can't turn around and read or write English. She must have got one of the boys to write. She's having trouble with poor Bertie. And I said to her, she said, I can't go anywhere, because I've got to do everything for Bertie. But he's in the invalid chair. Lou, he's turned around, who's over there, but any writing it's got to be done. I've done it really, as I say, apart from Auntie Jessie. Joe was the only one that ever wrote to her, but she couldn't, and she turned around and that, and about every 12 months I write to young Mick. Very fun. Angelo I don't speak to her. If I spat on him and saved his life I wouldn't do it. I hate him. And but apart from that, Lou's doing all right. I hear about him from Auntie Nina, and I'm pleased he's getting on, good. And as I say, I got a letter from his mother the other day, but the rest of them, I don't bother with.
Were you ever involved in the Maltese community in an organised sort of way, like after the war?
No. There was no organisation. There was nothing. Nobody done. You just got out on your own. Good luck if you got on, and if you sunk down, well, it's too bad for you.
You see the town?
What? Oh, Mr. Coffee.
I wanted to ask, what happened to the people you mentioned who were your Maltese neighbours in Stanley Street after the Depression was over?
Well, we all lived there. We're all very friendly. Our children got born. Well, I only had Eunice, and they had extra children, and they lived there. Vincy Elliot is still living there at 191 Stanley Street. Mrs. Seeney, she's living in Stall Street, North Melbourne. She shifted into another place.
She's a Maltese woman?
No, she's an Australian woman. We were all the Maltese young people were married to Australian girls, see? And Eula Vella, she died. Susie Aegis, she's living over here in the flats. Julian's, he's a Maltese, and his wife, one of his sons only 6 weeks older than Eunice. And as I say, seniors, well, Ferrugia's, both of them died. See, this is years. Eunice is 52-year-old now, and I was married 2 years before I had Eunice. So this is 54-year-old.
But that going back to that period of the Depression, they were unemployed. Then when the Depression improved or ended, what sort of employment did they get? Did they go to...
Well, Charlie worked on a wharf. Frank Ferrugia worked on a wharf, didn't he?
Big vendor went
on a wharf. Frank Elliot was a scab on a wharf. So they all worked round about, either in the Albion quarries they worked, or else they worked on the wharf. Charlie Seeney, he worked for the Harbour Trust, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
They went from the harbour to down with the winch or something.
Yeah.
You know, when they clean
They clean up the silt
the
and all that. But they're all like, they've all done like that.
Well, how would they get to the Albion Quarry in those days?
Well, by the train. By the train. We're at North Melbourne Station. They take the train to Sunshine or Albion. There was a lot of Maltese living at the quarries in those days, single fellas.
They used to live in tents in the old days and up there.
Up there?
Because there was no houses there. It was St. Albert was one house.
That's right.
We used to go, Robert and I used to go with Mick and John Saliba.
Yeah, well, there was nothing else but paddocks. I've got a photo in there of Eunice out at Sunshine there with Mick Pace's place. Yes, Eunice milking the cow. That was in a great big paddock. And Mick said to me, when I was thinking about shifting from Stanley Street, he says, Days, why don't you buy out here? And I said to him, he said to me, all this ground, he could foresee everything a lot. He says, it's all going to be very valuable. He said, and you know, you can buy them out. I heard him.
For £3.
I said to him, look, I wouldn't live out here.
Right.
I said, I wouldn't turn around and live out here. I says, if you gave me the block of land and money with it. I says, I hate here. Mick turned around, he made a lot of money, but when he'd go to the Sunshine Council and he'd buy a block of land for back rates. So nobody had any money in those. It was a very poor part.
Mick Pace, was it?
Mick Pace, yeah, Mick Pace. He finished up leaving his money to the church.
They done that show here. He used to live in show here.
Anyway, thank you very much for excellent interviews.
Oh, I tell you, if ever you go out Sunshine or know anybody at Sunshine, I know, and see any of them know the Pace boys, Charlie's still living, I think. I haven't seen Charlie for years.
We never seen him for...
But up there, they lived in Glengala Road, I think.
We used to go to them, they used to come to us, even when she had the first baby. We her in our house in Hawkesbury.
Yes.
You know...
but you know how you
but they seem so...
Mick's dead, I think Sam's dead, but I think Charlie might still be living. But last I heard of them, they lived in Glengala Road.
Where we used to go, isn't it?
Yes, Glengala Road.
Across that channel.
Yes. But he was a very quiet fella, Charlie. He was a nice boy.
Very quiet.